one thing I representing a man for Uptown TV. You understand?
You know, and when African people find themselves in these conservative spaces, one of their first go-to is to deny their own Africanness or blackness by othering Africans and black people. And this is what she's been doing, and she has done this over time. And while we respect her, seriously respect her, the journey for her, we've been following that journey closely, and we'll talk about that another time, but we've been following her journey very closely. And it's not been an easy one. But at the same time, that journey has been at the expense of black issues, African issues, and I suppose you'll say, well, how is she going to go black issues, African issues, and make it to that position? I suppose she really can't. And we see that with Barack Obama. We're seeing that with Kamala Harris. We see that from time to time, even with Sunak as an Indian. It's later on, much later on, when he was literally fighting for his life after he made that dastardly mistake of calling the elections before time, that we saw him literally coming out and saying, oh, but they call me Packy, and it is racist, and I'm so upset about it. But all along, he never saw race, never considered race, never thought about race. And anything racist was for him not racist. One of the biggest donors to the Tory party is a racist who said that Diane Abbott should be shot or something to that effect. So for me, I'm literally just watching to see what happens, whether it is just clearing a path for Nigel Farage, going to give her hell. And I am not quite sure what's going to happen, but it's a conversation I'm going to have another time. Believe me, I want to have this conversation. I'm going to have it another time. Another thing that's happening in the UK, and I'll also talk about that later on if I get some chance, is this Channel 4 documentary that happened last night on the secret wealth of Charles and William. It is, I want to congratulate Channel 4. This investigative piece, for me, is one of the most important pieces of journalism that we've seen in a very, very long time. And it's going to mark, we will remember this Channel 4 documentary, I think. It's going to mark a period, a time, because we have never seen anything like this. I come back to this. I'll really find some time in the program to come back to this documentary on Channel 4, The Secret Millions of Charles and William. Very revealing. And I thought, because it took so long to come on, because it was cancelled 3 times already, while the palace lawyers and others tried to do whatever they were doing with it, because you know how they do things. But it was aired last night on Channel 4 in the United Kingdom. Go and Google it if you can, even if you can't find the documentary itself. Google the reporting around it. It is shocking for many. For many in England, it's not shocking, but even in England, people are saying that we are shocked in the UK. So we're paying some serious attention to this. I want to come back to this also. And later on in the morning, I'm going to be giving some more information. Attorney at law. He holds a master's in international business. He's a broadcast journalist, host, producer, and he has been a radio engineer. He has 18 years of radio experience, including here at IRA FM. And you might recall his early program here at IRA FM, Youth Voice, Young Voices. And he's worked also on BBC Caribbean Service. And I think I'm missing your New York radio station. Was it WLIB, Ian?
WBAI.
WBAI. Welcome, Ian. Thank you so much. You are also a St. Marian and a St. Mary High School graduate, so it makes it even more important that we're having this conversation while where in the United States are you exactly?
Long Island.
All right, so here you are.
Long Island, New York.
New York. we're looking at the elections here. For so many in the world, it appears that this is the only thing that's happening, because every country, I think, in this side of the world, I'm not quite sure what's happening in the global south, the Russia and and China and North Korea. But I'm sure that for most of the world, we're glued to what's happening in the United States. I'm talking to Ian this morning as an attorney, but also mainly as a former journalist, a broadcast journalist who has done a lot of work in this regard. You've been through an American election already, right, as a journalist, Ian?
Certainly, yes.
Which one was it?
Well, it began with the re-election of George Bush. I had gone to the States just after the 9/11 had been the big thing in the news, and I went there in 2002, and even then, the rancor over the, shall we say, stolen election, where, one person wins the popular vote, but the electoral college says something else, and it had come down to like 500 and odd votes in Florida, and somehow George Bush managed to emerge as the president. Then in 2004, when John Kerry became the Democratic nominee, it became, a thing between the Yaleys and the Skull and Bone Society and all of these, patrician conversations that were happening. And then the utter dismay when Mr. Bush was re-elected, and people, got the sense that, they had to get out of town, leave and go to Canada because, the world was coming to an end, that kind of a thing. And then in 2008, the, shall we say, miraculous election of Barack Obama to the presidency of the United States, which for many was an unheard of thing. It couldn't happen. People thought he was going to be killed, that kind of a thing. And, the problems of the world, if you remember at the time, the crisis, the financial crisis, the meltdown of the world's global economy, of the global economy was underway. And some people thought, no, this time for the black man is just the wrong time, and this is setting him up to fail. But we saw quite differently. He got re-elected. The interesting thing about the 2012 election was then by that time I had fully naturalized and was able to cast a vote from Barbados, which is one of the things that fascinates me about the democracy project within these metropoli north of us, where their citizens can register a vote from wherever in the world they are. Did so in 2012 from Barbados, as I said, and in 2016 from Jamaica, and 2020 from Jamaica, and so here I am in 2024 in another congressional district, now observing and going to drop off my early ballot today, because today is the deadline for that.
As a matter of fact, I think the last time you were on, we were actually talking about some of these very issues, because one of the things that was happening here on the island was we had discussions around dual citizenship. And so you were on talking about that, and within the context of even the United States and the dual citizenship. And I remember you speaking specifically to those who vote in the U.S., have a vote in the U.S., have a vote in Jamaica, and how important it is to maintain that status quo, right or wrong.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, what was interesting at the time was that we were talking about the nationality of the leaders of the opposition. And what I found remarkable was that people there in Jamaica who were dual nationals of Britain were able to vote in the British election from there as well. And in fact, people who had gone to England, who weren't even quote-unquote British nationals but members of the Commonwealth, could also register a vote in those elections because they were there. It blew my mind.
I can see how. So here we are now talking about blowing your mind. What would I just... No, but I think I'll leave that for a minute because I'm not quite sure if you saw that speech that Trump gave with the microphone and all of that. I mean, that was that triple X-rated speech and what he did with the microphone and what he said. Wow. I've never. But to come back to the campaigns, Kamala Harris, of course, and Trump himself. Looking at the two campaigns, the what would you say are the major issues or the major issue that separate these two campaigns? And talk to us a little bit about how they differ, if in any way, in a serious way.
Well, it is interesting. When I migrated to the United States, we were under this notion of the quote unquote objective journalist. The gold standard a lot of us were taught was to look at how the BBC covered things, and you wanted to be that journalist who, in a sense, was somewhat in the middle. You basically held a microphone to one, you held a microphone to the other one, and pretty much you passed. You gave a representation of what they said in a way that none of them could say you're unfairly, biased toward. You're biased towards any of the others. And then you come here now, and the bigger conversation on journalism is, it's really a veneer, because even the Beeb's perspective is colored some kind of way. And if you train yourself well enough, you will see where they're going.
Of course.
I say all of that to say this, that one, here in the U.S., to participate in the process, you register as either a Democrat, a Republican, an independent of some sort, and I'm not sure what happens for the third parties. So I want this to be clear that I'm a quote-unquote registered Democrat. I don't know if I go further in this journalism thing that I would, possibly change my registration to say independent.
Or the Green Party.
Yes, or any one of those, right? Yes. So I speak to you with shall we say, a colored perspective, and I watch the comedians on air, the Jimmy Fallon, the Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, seemingly all on this side, shall we say, this side being the side of the liberal, progressive. And if you're on the Fox side, then we know where you stand. As you look at the two campaigns, it's almost a cheese and chalk conversation. One seems to be about rationality. The other one seems to be, let's go as far right. And you don't even know seemingly where left and right is, as extreme to one side as the other. Call names. The Trump side seems all about calling names. Every time you thought your mind was blown, it gets blown even more. I was out of town last Sunday, but then when you hear of the rally at Madison Square Gardens, where the comments about Puerto Ricans, you think to yourself, this campaign is just off the charts and is just out of whack. You pass the yards with the Trump signs, and you pass the buildings with the Trump flag flying. You stop at a 7-Eleven, and right at the counter there's paraphernalia selling Trump, a bumper sticker, a pass by.
But what does it say then about if it's so much more about him in terms of the flyers you're seeing, the paraphernalia, the flags in the yards and so on? What does it say about the likelihood of who will win if you were going to use this as an indicator?
Well, I tell you this, and because we're in the media business too, right? There's a bread and butter issue going for all media owners, right? If this campaign gets hyped and it's a nail biter, I like it. So the more ridiculous things he says, he being Trump says, and the more she reacts to those sound bites, uses them against him and vice versa, right? The media hypes this, and it almost becomes like a promotion for a clash, it's like Sting.
Yes.
It's through the hard way.
It's like Sting on the show going last night up a thing there. One big show going last night.
Okay.
Yes.
So you say, well then, boy, man, I have to go there and see. And show date is November 5.
Yes.
And because, like I said, early voting is underway now, then pretty much there are people who are registering their support one way or the other and leading up to the time. So you get the sense that you can't believe, really, for all this ridiculousness, because we go from St. Mary and we have a shame tree. And for some people, we feel that the shame tree dead, right? Now, if you would be supporting a candidate that would be, shall we say, just ridiculous, embarrassing, that kind of a way, then if you hoisted a banner supporting them, you'd want to take it down, right? I watched the British elections in July, and I was amazed at the kind of support Farage and his party got. People didn't want to vote Conservative, so they went for him. And it was like the British society really needs to examine itself to see what is it about them that would lead them towards this. Well, hey, here, what am I, in a sense, easily discovering? That there's a deep conversation going on where the demonization of your neighbor is quite possible, because what you can recognize and see as clear lies are, in a sense, good truth. So on Sunday, one party rails against a part of the constituency as being garbage, from an island of garbage. By Tuesday, a president giving to Goffs categorizes the other side supporters, or some supporters of the other side, as garbage. Then what happens? The showman comes out with a vest of a garbage man, drives around in a garbage truck, and somehow the pendulum swings back to the other side, and you go, man, this is a real nail biter now, So the polls look ridiculously close.
All right,
hang on. Figure out why.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to come back to the polls after this break. Take a quick break. Brother and colleague Ian Forrest is standing by. Ian Forrest is an attorney at law, a journalist, a broadcaster, producer, and radio engineer. And he's been looking at the U.S. elections underway. We're having this conversation with him, just his own perspective as a journalist from what he's seeing. Ian, you mentioned earlier, before we come to the polls, that the Nigel Farage situation in the UK elections. Nigel Farage himself had gone to the United States to meet with Donald Trump, if you remember, when the elections were announced. He left the UK and went to the United States. He's a very good friend of Donald Trump, he says. And you also talk about how in this election cycle, we're seeing, it's more now than ever, it's easy the order is to turn against your neighbor against neighbor, literally. But what that points to, bringing Nigel Farage and his UK party there in the UK, is the Reform UK. They are standing on the very same issue, which is immigration, isn't it? Farage and Donald Trump, they have made immigration the center point for them, the central point, which in a way goes to the point you're making about turning against your neighbor, because if your neighbor is from Puerto Rico, he goes to the garbage, but Puerto Rico is an American state, which is interesting. Or if your neighbor is from Haiti, then your neighbor is eating dogs and cats and so on, and you turn against each other. So they've made immigration this massive thing. And so as far as the campaigns are concerned, there seems to be that demarcation, doesn't it, as to what they have centered, what the Democrats have centered, and what the Republicans are centering.
Looking at, they say all politics is local. So I am in, previously, it was almost like you live in a place where you feel like you got a wasted vote. I was formerly in our Jamaican sisters constituency, the 9th Congressional District in New York. That was in Brooklyn, yeah? And so she almost runs unopposed, or certainly I'm thinking she ran unopposed in the primaries, and so will be eschewing for a congressional seat again. Yes. So now I'm in a place where the sitting congressional representative is a Republican. And man, they've been going after his record. He's a former police officer, and they're saying he wasn't one of them good cops. The city paid out money on his behalf because he was a little liberal with his gun and all these kinds of things. So right here, it's a real dog race over on this side of the island, where one of the executives in this Long Island here is very pro-Trump, and we're talking about issues that come down to bathroom use. On the ballot is Prop 1, where we're trying to, the state is essentially saying, we want equal rights for all. The other side is turning it now into that culture war issue, where we're talking about if you have all of these transgender things going on, then what we could have is that, men could be running against women in these kinds of things and using bathrooms. So you move from, so immigration is a very big issue. But we're talking about equity. We're talking about women's rights. So he's, lockstep with the Republican agenda on enough things, which gives the opening now for the representative Laura Gillen, who's trying to replace him, to say if you're dealing with women's rights issues, he would take away your rights to an abortion, IUD, all of these kinds of things, I spread out a lay here of all the people who have, in a sense, ganged up. I even get that report card, to say, you voted in the 2020 election, we have no data. If you did, we have no data. 2022, we have no data on that. Don't disappoint us. Go out there and vote this time around.
Yes.
There's a section on the ballot talking about judges. Now, I could just run straight party line. In Jamaica, you feel this is unheard of, but I'm in a sense going to be voting for various parts of the judiciary, and there is, is either going to mark or I'm going to do a little digging, and they don't campaign like the rest of the representatives and so on and so forth. But yes, immigration is the big thing, and so in a place where there's a real fight between the Republican and the Democrat and whomever is the third party, then now, even as far north as New York, then we're talking about a border issue, because among the interesting things done by particularly the Texas governor, what he did was take all the immigrants that he could find, put them on buses, and send them to the bluest parts, as in the Democratic-controlled states of the United States, the Democratic-controlled cities of the United States. And so New York has come under a whole, just a lot of immigrants being around here. So in a sense, now, you get to test principles. You are all pro-immigration and all of these things. Well, see if you can handle how many thousands, how many bus loads of them coming into your area. Now you got to figure out where you house them, how you feed them, what benefits you give them. And if there are people who are parts of the constituency who feel that they aren't getting the best deal from Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, they're in a dire straits, and they see these new people coming, not unlike the conversation in Jamaica, where when these Haitians show up, you who think we are, Sister Varian, we sell your St. Mary people, we celebrate Bookman, Dottie, and all of these kinds of conversations, and we celebrate the Haitian brothers and sisters. But make too much boats wash up on Portland, then you get to see how, shall we say...
We're going through that right now. As a matter of fact, I had that discussion last week with Malane, because what they have done now, the government has done this. They have gone around and corralled and rounded up every, a lot of Haitians, I'm not going to say every, but separating families, separating mothers from children, fathers from wives, etc., etc. And they have already deported them back to Haiti. That happened recently. So we had that conversation last week. We can understand exactly what you're saying. So, Ian, to take it to the next step then, in terms of Jamaica, this U.S. elections has implications to Jamaica within the context of immigration, doesn't it? Because even as we're speaking, there was I think I saw something before day this morning about ICE still, committed to to sending those planes back to Jamaica. So the deportations are going on in the high swing. And one of the reasons for that, of course, I think, this is my reading, and you can tell me what you think about it, is that, of course, because immigration is such a big issue, and because this is something that the Democrats are fighting, they have to maintain that level of deportations to tamp down whatever else is coming from the Republican is throwing at them regarding immigration. So for Jamaica, there are serious implications. We have ICE coming out this morning saying, okay, we are continuing these deportations full speed ahead.
Well, one of the ironies that I've witnessed, right? And so let's be clear. When you, as the leader of your country, take on the mantle of leadership of your country, one of the first things you want to do is secure your country. And we're talking about secure borders everywhere, right? So our current leader there in Jamaica, I guess, has some concept that he has to secure the borders of Jamaica and our national interests. And so it is no different from the Sunaks, the Starmers, it doesn't matter. We saw Barack Obama, who, for all intents and purposes, looked progressive. There were a group of people who had to back him into a corner one time and say, look, we didn't vote for you to be as draconian. Because at one point, the statistics showed that he had deported more people than his predecessor. Mm-hmm. This doesn't square well. It doesn't look well. Mm-hmm. We have now a President Biden who is facing a conversation from his populace who is saying, you are not doing well enough to secure us. All of these people selling drugs or fentanyl and these rapists and terrorists and all these kinds of things coming into the country, you're not protecting us well enough. Mm-hmm. You have to do something about that. And I think we would be naive to feel that if even a Kamala Harris comes to the power, that she is not going to be facing the same kind of thing.
I think that's well said.
We then ask, we then ask ourselves is the degree to which you do that. Do you now see children wrapped up in foil paper as they await this separation, this return? You keep a child in the United States, but you deport the parents back to wherever they come from.
Oh, you put them in cages. I want to go to the polls only because we're out of time. So yes. The polls you were saying earlier seem to be pretty close. I don't put a whole lot of stock on polls, and I know for us as journalists, we have seen so much over time how polls are manipulated around election times and so on. But in America, over time, we've seen where polls, apart from when Hillary Clinton lost there, because the polls were showing that she would have won. A lot of them showed that she would have won, even though we had people on this program saying no, she was going to lose. So that closeness we're seeing now between the two candidates in terms of the polls, what do you make of it?
I feel it is a fiction. I honestly feel it is a fiction. If you are the New York Times and you commission a poll, look, it's the questions you ask. It's the kind of responses you want. And it is now how you reach people. Once upon a time, polling was, somebody on the end of a corded phone picking that up. And then now it changed because people got rid of their corded phones and they're now on cell phones. So you had to figure out a way to reach them. And so it's a high science. The science is evolving on the whole thing. But for me, you might pardon me, if you want to sell more papers, if you want to be more relevant, then you make it a real contest. It can't be a blowout from as early as summer. You know what I mean? Where one guy is just going to lose, the other side. But beyond the fiction or the unreliability of the poll, because in 2022, this projected red wave was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Biden was so toxic, he was going to bring the whole side down. Yes. We didn't see that happen, really. Mm-hmm. So this time around, you're asking yourself, in these states where it's close, or looking close, an event like Sunday, how does it swing? When I say Sunday, now I'm talking about the garbage comment, and we're looking at these strong states like Pennsylvania, where because of the devastation of the hurricane, you remember a lot of Puerto Ricans came to the mainland. Yes, and so they are in enough of these swing states where the voting majority wasn't by too much for either side, who won. So now you have hundreds of thousands in Pennsylvania hearing this comment as Puerto Ricans. If they didn't vote already and if they were leaning for one side or the other or on the fence, a comment like this puts them over the top. We're going to see on Tuesday. We're going to see how these votes go, and I think the pollsters on Tuesday night, the 5th, thereafter, are going to have another conversation with themselves about how right they were. There's this guy who has on record. He was somebody, I guess, who was ridiculed about the 2016 election when he predicted that Hillary Clinton was going to lose, right? Trump was going to win. He has had a hit rate of calling all of them since sometime in the 80s. And
that's Lichman.
He's saying that...
It's Lichman, isn't it?
Yeah. He's saying now that Trump will lose this one.
Yeah, I heard him. Him not so confident, no.
So what we now know, though, is that every vote matters. I tell you, my little area here covered with voting paraphernalia. Everybody wants you to get out there and vote.
Do you get the impression that there's great enthusiasm among voters, the electorate, that people are because we see the early voting that the high percentages of voters who are turning out, Georgia and places like that. Do you get the impression that there is enthusiasm more than usual, or just this is normal?
Kabu, I would almost say I'm ashamed of myself that I at one point, and we talked about the age of the man, the incumbent, being why people weren't supporting him. I think that's a narrative some people wanted to push. I think the real undercurrent is this elephant in the room, a one-year devastation of our peoples that essentially, on principle, you say, Russia, Ukraine, this is a travesty, an atrocity, can't work. But when we're talking about a people decimating another people, it's straight up genocide, but you're providing the bombs even as you talk about, we're working hard on doing the thing. I don't know if you noticed, but when the union workers at the docks said, we're going to shut this baby down, 2 days, we had a solution. But you're working a year where you're stoking the planes with these 2,000-pound bombs. You've devastated a whole place. And essentially, we can't have a solution just yet. Every time we try to have a real thing at the United Nations, we know who blocks that. So I'm thinking maybe the undercurrent was, it really wasn't about your age, but it was about your complicity in a genocide.
Listen, okay, let me wrap that up. Just last sentence and we're out of time. I'm so sorry, Ian. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is people who were on the fence coming in and saying, no man, if this fascist to run this place, I really have to come off of the fence. And then you're watching in big places where it really should matter that they vote for the more sensible of the candidates, but you're no better in terms of what really affects us.
But there's also a genocide. But there's also a genocide that you referenced just now that is still going on. May you have to pick up back after the elections because we're totally gardens featuring live performances by Shaggy, Busy Signal, Tanya Stevens, Elaine, Tessan Chin, Nadine Sutherland, Dwayne Stevenson, Brick and Lace, among others. Music will be provided by the Jamaica All-Star Band, IRFM's Muta Baruka, Colin Hines, Kurt Riley, and Richie Clark. Gate open at 3 p.m. Showtime is at 6 p.m. sharp. Get your tickets now at marciagriffiths.com and also at caribtix.com. And just so you know, physical tickets can be purchased at Jamaica Pegasus Lobby and Music Mart in Kingston, Fontana Pharmacy and Fesco in Mandeville, Double Scoops in Albion St. Thomas, Genus Pharmacy in Portmore, and Total Gas Station in Ocho Rios. Hearing Sister P loud and clear there. Sister P, you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Sister P, it's around these times that we find out where all our friends are,
Absolutely. But let me say greetings and good morning to the family.
Yes, greetings to you, Sister P, and thank you on behalf of the family. Where exactly in the U.S. are you now, Sister P?
I am a little bit outside of Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. And so
Yes.
there's a whole different, I think, complexion and a whole different kind of attitudes to the election, much different from, we just spoke with Ian Forrest, I suppose much different from what Ian is seeing in New York.
Yes, Tennessee is a totally red state in terms of their red and blue.
Yes.
And what is interesting here is that driving through, we don't see any signs for the presidential candidates. What they have here is that everywhere you turn, you see signs for the local candidates, or what they call the down candidates, the state representatives. Those signs are everywhere. But driving through, you don't see any for the presidential candidates. And it's also interesting to note that neither of the presidential candidates have come this side.
Oh. Well, maybe. Well,
No.
it's a done deal. I wonder if they're making the mistake that Wisconsin made with Hillary Clinton, or was it Michigan? Yeah, when she didn't go. Yeah, Wisconsin, when she didn't go at all and lost it.
Yeah, they haven't come here any at all. And it's basically, it's, as you say, I guess they figure it's a done deal, so why bother to spend any money here?
And you say it's a very red state. So, Sister P, just from your own perspective, looking through your Pan-African lens, the issues there, I suppose, do you get the impression that people are concerned about these wider issues like the immigration and the abortion? Although these are local issues for them still, but these seem to be the issues that they are platforming, on the national stage. Do you get the impression that people
It's interesting because I think here people are more interested in education, for instance, the schools. Well, maybe that's the environment that I am in.
Yes.
You don't really hear, it's not like in the North where you actually hear people talking about the election, It's like, I don't get that vibe here. I was in week before last, I was in Austin, Texas, and there were Trump signs everywhere. Yes, there were Trump signs everywhere. And I said to my people, so don't they have any Harris signs? I said, well, there was 1 and 2, but Texas is one of those places. So maybe they're in one section of the state and it's all blue, or in another section and it's all red. Well, where I was, it was all red.
Yes, I suppose Houston a little bit more bluish.
Yes.
Go back to the education. So what are people concerned about re-education? Do you know?
Well, what's happening is the zoning with the schools.
Oh,
it has a lot to do with the zoning with the schools. People move into, Nashville is I think it's probably the fastest growing city in America right now. If it's not the fastest, it's very close to it. But they tell you about zoning, and people purchase their homes based on the zoning, because then the schools would be what they would think it would be. But it's not working that way. So people are buying homes thinking that they're going to have a better education for their children, when in truth and in fact, it is not that way.
I know that this whole thing about charter schools, does that factor in at all?
Well, yes, it does. It does. Yes, and I know you know that you should speak to about that.
Yes. Is she beside you any at all?
No, she's not beside me. She's not beside me.
Sabira Gordon is a person we should speak to about that, because she's heavily involved in this, Sister P.
One of the things that I want to say, I've been around and listening to our young women from Jamaica, and they are really into this election. They're really into it. And for them, it's the image of a Black woman. It really plays heavily on them, the significance of a Black woman. possibly becoming the president.
So they're not concerned with the conversation of whether or not she's black. They for them.
No. They don't have that. They don't have that conversation any at all. None at all. As far as they're concerned, it's a black woman, and they are black, and they just want to, and coming from a Caribbean background, the way Trump speaks is not something that they would move towards. Absolutely not. Because you know how our culture is. Yes. I mean, well, it used to be.
And I saw him last was it last night or night before that? He was literally SAing, assaulting a microphone. I mean, I've never seen anything like that, honey. I'm wondering, to me, is he going to get away with that? There's this thing that I cannot wrap my head around, that he's right that he could do anything, and people would allow him to get away with it, because that to me was so vulgar.
Yes.
But
well, that is it, the vulgarity. And that, let me tell you, our young women here are the ones that I know. They're professionals. So that vulgarity does not appeal to them any at all. But, there's something that I want to say, because I've been thinking seriously about it. I came to America, as a teenager. And people like to say that's not who we are. But they killed John F. Kennedy. In 1963.
Yes.
They killed his brother. I think I was living in Los Angeles at the time. They killed Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all of these other people. So when they keep saying that this is not who we are, I don't know who they're talking to.
Yeah, it's
because that's exactly who you are.
Yeah. And we're seeing more and more of it in this particular election, because you wonder, the more you see it and the more you hear, you wonder how much further this can go. And there seems to be a kind of an impotence on the part of people to change a trajectory. Do you get the impression that there will be some kind of a violence attached to this one way or the other, Sister P?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was a speaker in Austin, Texas. And, the Jamaicans as a whole, a lot of them who are in the States are, I'm going to go back to Jamaica, not even going there on vacation because of the crime and the this and the that and so forth. And I had to remind them, that we who live in Jamaica, we're scared to come to America. And, they need to understand that. We are actually scared to come to America. And I was asking, very scared to come to America. I found myself the other day, I went someplace and I didn't have my passport. And all of a sudden I started to panic. Yeah, I really did. I started to panic. I said, because what happens if they stop me? How do I prove that I am, that I am just visiting here or whatever it is? Because it has become and it is becoming that kind of a stage, isn't it? When you hear people talk about, Ian Forrest was just talking about how the conditions, the environment where neighbors are against neighbors now, and this has to do with just people being other, which is how America is founded on this otherness. You're talking about the Statue of Liberty, you're talking about Ellis Island, you're talking about, the Italians and the Irish and all of that kind of multiculturalism, but somehow make America great again. Seems to mean take it to a place that it has never been, ever in its history, which is one of the things that has come up because, as you know, my young people, and they were talking about this one Jamaican young man, and I mean, like he's voting for Trump, and they're explaining to me that Jamaicans up here, they forget that they're immigrants. So when Trump talks about immigrants, they don't consider themselves.
It's true. And hello to my family. It is very true. It is very true. It is true. They don't consider themselves immigrants. They totally forget that they're immigrants too. So they themselves are so much against the Haitians. Yes. And I think our education system in Jamaica, we really have to do some improvements there. Yeah.
Because here you are. I mean, like, you're in America, you're an immigrant, and you're fighting against other immigrants.
Well, as you said before, it is cognitive dissonance because they just do not see themselves as immigrants. Or I see you coming, so I missed a break, didn't I? It's the fun that I'm having with Sister P. Sister P, let me take a quick break. Sorry.
Okay.
There's a whole other set of Jamaicans, though, especially those in a lot of those in Florida, who are seriously Trump supporters, and they're voting Trump. They have been Republican and voting Conservative, and you have a lot of Jamaicans, even on the island in Jamaica. You think a lot of people see themselves as voting in this election. There is a strong support for Donald Trump. I don't know if you have noticed that.
Yes, I have noticed that, and there are certain things, there are certain benchmarks for me. And one of them is the Central Park 5.
Mm-hmm.
And what they don't understand is that they could easily have found themselves in the same situation as the Central Park 5.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing also is the fact that when I went to America first, we didn't know that we were black. You see?
Yes.
We didn't know that we were black.
Yes.
It's that we had to go to America to find out that we were black.
Mm-hmm.
We were just Jamaicans. And somehow we tend to think that has passed. But the longer I live is to realize that mentality still exists.
Mm-hmm.
It still does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That Jamaicans don't find themselves, in unity with black people in America. They still think that they are the other. They are Jamaicans, and yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad.
So that support for Donald Trump is coming from that place you're saying of thinking.
Yes, I would think so. A lot of it, I would think. They don't see when he calls people vermin and all of that stuff. They don't see that as pertaining to them. Mm-hmm. It's not them.
Yes,
it's not talking about them.
Sister P, I know you've been following this thing very closely and looking at Kamala in particular. One of the things that she's the Republicans and the Democrats are locked in arm in arm with is the question of Gaza and Israel and what's happening there. I know I'm asking you to go into your brain box a little. Do you think this is something that can cost her the election, cost the Democrats the election, this Kamala Harris's stance on Gaza?
I don't think it's going to cost her the election because remember, that it was Trump who did that whole Jerusalem thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, remember that his son-in-law really wants Gaza from the river to the sea.
Right.
To build hotels and whatever it is. But the thing about it is that, you see, what happens is that people like you and I and a lot of the Pan-African family, we really don't see any difference, in terms of who is going to run America. Mm-hmm. Because we know that whoever the president is not basically who runs America.
Right.
So these are just figureheads that are put there, and then people fight over which one is which one. Mm-hmm. But similar to how we in Jamaica, we don't see any difference with the two parties. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of people up here who really don't see any difference with the two parties, and so what they do, they don't vote. They don't vote. Right. Yes, I
some
can't
people
even
vote.
See any difference.
I hear some people saying that they're voting down ballot.
Well, that's exactly, yes, that's what I'm saying about being here in Tennessee, how you see the people, they're really voting for their state representatives. You see those signs everywhere, but you don't see any presidential signs. You don't see that. But they're really into, because even talking with Samira, and she said, I have to go and vote for these people, that is what they call the down ballot. Yes.
Yes. And I hear a lot of people saying that, especially Pan-Africans who are looking at, because their voting thing is much different from ours, Jamaicans public. I'm going to explain it with Kwame when he comes on right after you, Sister P. He's going to take us through understanding what it means by voting down ballot and the electoral college and all of that.
Something that I would love to see more.
Yes.
I think in Jamaica, you could have put up golden sign or holding a sign in front of your yard.
But people are doing it. Why not? A lot of people doing it all over Jamaica, Sister P. Well, also go to Tivale.
Well,
and then I'm down and so on and so forth. People do it. But maybe they do it differently because they have the flags that they put on the poles.
Oh, yes,
and they
yes,
wrap all the
yes,
poles
yes,
all the way down the road.
yes.
All the what them call them, the electric poles are wrapped, from pole to pole. Anyway.
Yes, but it is true. That is true.
So, Sister P, I know we'll be both on the phones for the next few days, and especially on the 5th. Me know me and you're going to be talking a whole lot through this thing. So, I'll be hearing.
We soon come.
You soon come. Well, I hope you stay and be an observer for the elections and come after. Observe the elections.
Well, yes, I'll be there right after.
All right, okay.
The after clubs.
All right, yes, exactly. You don't want to get your...
I'll be on the first night out.
Yes, you'll be... All right, safe travel, Sister P. I see you when you come in.
Yes.
All right, a quick break. Sister P
Okay.
there in Tennessee. The IRFM team, the news team, will be live in Washington, D.C. They'll be covering the elections. They're heading there today. They're actually en route. Natalie Campbell, the news editor, and Shanice Gibbs, news presenter. Also, our sales manager, Nicholas Evans, and he'll be when Nicholas travels like this, he's usually 5 things, right? So sales manager, social media, and engineer. We miss those trips with Nicholas, because he's always a pretty good engineer. So they're heading to Washington, D.C. Today, and I'm about to speak with Nicholas Evans about that. The IRFM will be live and in living color in the United States for this election. And then right after that, I'll be speaking to a geopolitical analyst, Pan-African analyst, Kwame Pianke, and looking at the elections through a geopolitical lens. Also taking some time to understand the American elections, because it's pretty different from what we know, because we talk about voting down ballot, we talk about the Electoral College, and because we are so invested, Jamaica is so invested in the U.S. elections. This has been happening for quite a while, because you remember we had a similar all-out program when Barack Obama was running. And we were live to Washington, D.C. when Obama won. We were there for the election. We were live to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration and for almost everything. So we do it like this. So here is Nicholas Evans, sales manager, social media manager, and engineering on the road, heading to Washington, D.C. Morning, Nick.
Good morning, Kabu.
Boy, you're on the road again in November to Washington, D.C. It's going to be cold.
Actually, Kabu, do you realize that this was the same time some years ago when Washington celebrating, I think it was the 80th anniversary of the coronation of Haile Selassie?
Exactly. We were at the Ethiopian embassy.
Yes, sir, I need to that file.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about it and I was saying that it's going to be cold in Washington, D.C. I hope Natalie and Shanice are prepared for that. I hope you tell them how cold it's going to be.
Yeah, we are prepared. I mean, we have been prepared and we are prepared. As a matter of fact, I do have Shanice on the line as well.
Oh, Shanice, good morning.
Good morning, Kabu.
All right. I hope you're hearing that it's going to be cold in D.C.
Yes, it is. Well, that's what we have heard as well. So
Yes.
we've made some preparations to, keep warm as possible when we are there.
Yes. So news is well represented because the news editor is there. Shanice, our news senior news presenter, will also be there. So let me go back to Nick shortly, and I'll come forward to you again, Shanice. Just say, all right. So I know that there are a lot of Jamaican journalists and a lot of teams who are heading to DC Nick, on the invitation of different people and different organizations. Is IRFM a part of any of that, or as usual, we are the non-aligned news voice? Just got to do it.
We are the non-aligned news voice. We have made our own connections, and I can tell you, Natalie has worked hard behind the scene, and it's not. We are going to DC, but the links will not only be DC. Really, the links will be from all over in terms of persons who have been contacted. But in DC, you know, our Ross Wayne Rose and the crew, Kabu, you know, we have to link
Dr. Wayne Rose.
Yes. Yes, and remember, I don't like the doctor party. I want to be doctor.
I know, but because we're talking the journalistic talk now, which
yes, maybe Professor Wayne Rose.
Professor Wayne Rose, who is right there in Maryland, just on the edge.
Yes. Yes, and I mean, we have made several links in terms of, being around Washington, including the watch, is it watch party, but where Kamala will be hanging out at Howard University. I mean, we will visit polling stations, and we will speak with members of the Jamaican community about, you know, their choice in terms of this election and why they're choosing the candidate. I mean, they have chosen and all of that. So it's a comprehensive thing. I mean, I hear you mention having somebody to look at the geopolitical thing, and we will do pretty much well. We have been doing that, Natalie, as a feature that has been running from, I think it was Wednesday. I mean, yeah, a lot of that, is being done.
Yes, it is brilliant. Sorry, go ahead, Shanice.
Yes, Natalie and myself, we have been doing a series of features.
Mm-hmm.
So we take it also from the Jamaican perspective. You know, we have to link it back to Jamaica. We're going to abroad, it's the U.S. election. But as you know, whatever happens in the U.S., most things that happens in the U.S., it affects us here in Jamaica.
Of course.
So we have to look at it at all angles, ensuring that persons understand that whatever the results, whatever the outcome, there might be some impact. There might be some implications for Jamaican citizens.
From the sound of it, Shanice, and this to me sounds really well produced. It sounds as if you'll also be doing exit polls. It sounds that way to me, like,
right.
You know, seriously well produced. I like the sound of that. To what extent does Kamala's heritage in terms of her father being Jamaican plays into how IRFM is covering this?
All right. So we know that she has, her father comes from Brownstown, St. Anne. So, you know, Jamaicans listening, first of all, Jamaica on a whole, they have an interest because she's of, she has Jamaican heritage.
Right.
But St. Anne, especially where IRFM headquarters is, we can't not be a part of it because, you know, that St. Anne is where we base.
Yeah,
and we have majority of our listeners here from St. Anne. If you take a taxi, you'll see a taxi driving past, it's RFM. So we have to have that input, putting out information, because we know that majority of our listeners know that this lady, who could potentially be the next president of the United States, she could win.
Yes.
Doesn't have to, but there's a possibility.
Yes.
So we have to ensure that the information coming out of RFM surrounds that.
Right, and that is critical, isn't it, Nick? Our relationship with Brownstown is serious, you know, Nick, right? Because even Kamala's, I think Kamala's family has been very involved in sponsoring, because they're business people, over time, in sponsoring even our Nick. I think
Redway Hardway, I think Mr. Redway himself is a relative.
Yes.
Redway Hardway. But,
and the other one, in terms of our what was it? Our New Year's Eve, our box. What do you call it?
It was Christmas Eve party. In
Grand Market,
yes.
Yeah, so we have a pretty good relationship with the family as a business.
And you know, Kabu, I'm seeing history one way or the other. I mean, it doesn't matter what anybody wants to say. Once your parents are Jamaican, you're a Jamaican. And what is certain, a Jamaican is running for president of the United States. Win, lose, or draw, a Jamaican would have run for in a significant way for the president of the United States. And if she wins, then a Jamaican is the president of the United States. That's another thing added to the list of accomplishments by Jamaicans. Starting hip-hop, starting reggae, one of the world's most popular music. I mean, starting the UNIA, a movement for black people all over the world, and no president of the free world. I mean, it doesn't matter what. It's a milestone for Jamaica again.
Right. Am I to assume that IRFM is 100% behind Kabla? Because I just...
put it this way. I am listening to the Jamaicans. And I must say, not all Jamaicans are convinced. As a matter of fact, there are Jamaicans who are up in their feelings saying, when she was running for vice president, we didn't feel the Jamaicanness.
No, but IRFM did. No, you recall IRFM did. I remember having that conversation with Natalie. I remember that the IRFM covered that extensively. Her Jamaican heritage, talked about her father.
No, but I'm saying, I'm talking about persons in the U.S. right now who I would have a dialogue with. I mean, they're saying, they believe, she never really hugged Jamaica. That is their belief.
You mean their own belief, right? Yes, I get the point.
Their own belief,
yes.
So, they are mixed reactions, and they are Jamaicans who have already voted for Trump, because the voting has been going on. So, so we know that there are some Jamaicans who haven't warmed up to her because they believe the relationship with her and her dad wasn't all that well and all of that. So, we're watching it go, but for me, it's Jamaica first. Whatever happens after, let me see. I'm not going to, I don't want to sit and imagine what would have happened in terms of support for Jamaica if we had a Jamaican in the White House. Let it be that, she goes there and then we can say, she helped her or she didn't help her, she can go away or whatever. But I'm not going to say she's to go away before, she gets a chance to show how our policies, and I know it wouldn't only be Jamaica, but in terms of the wider Caribbean and probably the wider world.
Ian Forrester was just on, attorney at law and journalist in New York. He was just on a while ago talking about the elections and from the New York perspective and as a journalist. And he just texted to say, must tell you how absolutely happy I am, that is all in capital letters, to hear that the news team is on the road to cover this. He says, if I am Christopher Columbus on this, pardon me. But so he's just sent me that note. So generally then, lay it out for me, Shanice, what the coverage will look like, because you're going to be there over a few days.
Right. So, today we'll be traveling. Tomorrow we'll be just climatizing. We have some things on the ground. We won't reveal it. We have made some preparations where to interview some persons. So we will be meeting with those people tomorrow. And then on the day, we have, as Nick said earlier, we will be going to some polling stations with some Jamaicans, ensuring that, we get their perspective as to what's actually happening on the ground. We have some also areas to probably some restaurants we'll go where we know Jamaicans, that's their place. We find out too what their feeling is like regarding that. So throughout the day, we'll be covering various angles. Won't give you all the details because, we have to keep fresh.
But just keep
and we
listening.
know that other persons are listening as well. So we will be...
and our teeth, it is true. They will certainly teeth your ideas. All right. So
we are competitive. We are Nixon's number one. But we have to be smart about how we do things. Yeah. So, and as you know, we will be going with our editor. So our editor is a veteran journalist.
Right.
And she'll be there to guide. And, she's great.
Exactly.
Right. That's
Natalie Campbell. All right. It sounds as if it's going to be a very busy few days. You're going to be covering this for the entire day. I suppose that we won't get the results on the very same day. So how long are you going to be in D.C.?
Well, maybe until the following day. So, hopefully by then we will know if U.S. is red or blue.
Well, that is unless you don't have no chat like what you have in Florida, like what we had in Florida with Bill Clinton and what's his name, Al Gore.
Yes.
And and it seems from what I'm hearing, do you have bulletproof vests?
Lord of mercy.
I'm constantly being warned that things could get rough. So we are veteran journalists. Natalie probably 30 little under belt, myself 30 years. So the newsroom would have covered the riot in 2010.
The Tivoli incursion.
Yes, people on the belly and the vehicle and all of that. So we have survived many storms, and we intend to survive this one as well if it becomes a storm.
Yes, it's about to become a storm. But I'm really happy that you're going, like Ian and myself. And I will be glued to IRFM all day, because this is, for us, groundbreaking, isn't it? Because even though we covered Obama's election, we didn't have a team in the way the team is going in now. So this would be a groundbreaking for us, isn't it, Nick?
Definitely a groundbreaking. And I'm happy. I'm happy that the newsroom headed by Natalie felt, this was necessary.
Yes.
And of course, Kabu, us, once something would have gone, we have to something go on. I mean, just call with him.
We did it, man. We did it. And I like, so talk to us quickly, Nick, about the broadcast equipment without giving too much away, because I know that when we travel these ways, we can broadcast from the bus, the taxi, the car, the airplane.
And it will be pretty much the same. I mean,
yes.
I collected 2 kits from Wisdom. And I mean, this is something that we do every year. We do it on the ice field. Doesn't do it on land. I mean, it's much simpler. Mm-hmm. So we will be driving and broadcasting. We will be static and broadcasting. We can even be broadcasting from our hotel rooms. We are prepared to broadcast from anywhere. Once we have internet or telephone connection. And of course, I mean, the internet everything that we need, I mean, is well thought of and planned out. So, unless we reach US, there's no internet or no phone connection. I mean, we'll be broadcasting from wherever we pitch, wherever we land.
Yeah. Shanice, have we taken into consideration that DC is going to be looking a whole lot different in terms of the fences that will be going up, the security that will be in place? Because we already see them start doing that. We see the high fences going up already. We see they've called out the what do they call the guards again?
The National Guard.
The National Guards have been called out, as you know. So there's a whole lot in terms of the ability to get into places. To what extent have we taken that into consideration?
Well, we've been guided. We've been guided by persons like Dr. Wayne Rose.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean he has also made at least 2 more connections. Ross Wayne, he lives in Baltimore, but I mean he has made connections in DC for people to be on the ground with us. I mean when he can't. So I mean we'll be guided by that, and I mean if we can't drive, we'll be on foot.
Of course. It sounds good. I'll be monitoring, Nick, and I'm sure that the links, we don't hear the promos yet. I'm sure the probably will start running soon. I don't have any in my program. But the news team is on the road and will be covering this election, the U.S. elections, beginning on election day or election
coverage actually starts tomorrow. No, it started before, but in terms of on the ground,
right.
Because of course, I mean, we
once you land, you're there. Yeah.
Yes, and
exactly.
we will link you with the people to find out who they're voting for, why they're voting that way, and all of that.
Exactly.
So it started already and will continue right up until hopefully by the time we're leaving on
you'll be announcing the winner.
The winner would have been known.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you, Shanice. I'm going to miss you guys at the Marcia Griffiths show later today.
Tell your man, boy.
Yes, business are business.
I was really, when it was announced, I was really looking forward to it. I didn't even realize the clash. 60 years in the business.
Yeah, man, it's a journey. As Marcia says, it's a journey. So we're looking forward to that. That's coming up this evening at
She's been in the business when my mother used to play Dolly House. Used to play with.
Nick, come on for the people. Nick, come on for the people on radio. All right, we talk soon. Nicholas Evans and Shanice Gibbs heading with Natalie Campbell, our news editor, to Washington, D.C. to cover the elections, the U.S. elections. Thank you so much, both.
You're welcome.
All right. Safe journeys.
Thanks.
Geopolitical analyst Kwame Pianke. K-Dot says, Great Rising Cabo, the man is right. The U.S. elections is setting out to be quite a sound clash. That was Ian Forrest who said it setting up like a sound clash. And what are you in the U.S. K-Dot? I just sent you a note. He says, I'm between Georgia and Alabama now. Plenty churches, many Trump campaigns. And then he goes on to say, we have no real education system that educates anyone. and we don't read. Cognitive dissonance remains high. Sister P is on point. And okay, great. Welcome, Yefine. Yefine has joined us from, where are you, Ye? Are you in South Carolina or North Carolina? Joining us from the United States. So many text tweets, and not tweets, but texts and messages coming in from the United States. All right, so Akeem says, bear in mind, Kemi, that's Kemi. All right, how did Andrew say I should pronounce her name? Badenoch, as opposed to Badenoch. And so she says, bear in mind that Kemi is a hardline Thatcher-style politician, but I actually supported her. I do believe she does see herself as off blacks. I'm not sure what you mean. She has rejected the cry of reparations, even worse than David Cameron. But it is interesting to see the Tory party putting a black, identified or not, leader in that deeply conservative organization. Yes, I take that point. And as I said earlier, I don't want to be right on it, as I'm saying to Andrew, that she's also clearing a path for Nigel Farage, and that will be sad. I know not a lot of people are going to agree with me that is sad. Anyway, on the U.S. elections, our brother says, I support Donald J. Trump because I know what to expect of him. Kamala has not been able to distinguish herself as a candidate or politician. She's using Hillary's playbook from 2016 and she's failing. The Democratic Party has taken minority groups for granted over the years, and they are realizing it. He continues, you see, the people are tired of being treated as prostitutes and are choosing their own path. Kamala also feels entitled. After I come from a middle-class family, I will never forget where I am, blah, blah, blah. He says, silly games get silly prize. And I'm getting that from a lot of people. Can I just say that a lot of our listeners are saying that? It is very, very interesting. Very interesting. I think if it's Jamaicans alone, many of them will be putting in Donald J. Trump. Okay, so Yefine says, I am in North Carolina. We just finished our IFA festivals. All right, great to hear, Yeye. And I won't bother you about the elections because I know you're just coming back spiritually on a very spiritual high. But what's happening in North Carolina? Yefine, Efun Bolade, the secret millions. But long and short of it is that a lot of the headlines are reading that King Charles and Prince William's estates are making millions from charities and public services. It's quite a shame, actually, when you read through it and when you listen. King Charles and Prince William's property empires are taking millions of pounds from cash-strapped charities and public services, including the NHS, state schools and prisons. And this is according to the really good investigative journalism, from the Sunday Times. As a matter of fact, if you've subscribed to the UK Sunday Times, that the entire thing is broken down there. So you can go to the Sunday Times and also to the Channel 4 documentary if you can get that with a VPN. But the reports claim that the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall, which are exempt from business taxes and used to fund the lifestyles of the royals and their philanthropic work, are set to make at least £50 million per year from leasing land to public services. The two duchies hold a total of more than 5,400 leases. It is a shame because when you break down, the investigation takes us to even to the point of the cancer charities. These two men are making monies from the cancer charities. Marie Claire, I think, and what's the other charity? But they're making money from the cancer charities. They are charging the NHS to park the NHS's ambulances on their properties. Charles is doing that. They are charging the councils for rent for prisons that are empty. Nobody in a prison, but they have to pay thousands of pounds for that. They're charging for running lines under the sea, on the beach. They're charging for public toilets. It is scandalous. It is a shame. It is the most scandalous piece of investigation that we've seen in a long time. I don't know if these two men have any shame, if the royal family have any shame, the monarchy have any shame at all. But this, I think, it has to mark a turning point in how things are done. And this is what we are clinging to. Why am I on and on about this? It's because this is what we subscribe to, the monarchy. Let me go to, it's 8:30 on IRFM, and we're standing by for the Supreme Ventures things at the same time. But it looked good to the point that they're playing Senna's music, and we see people saying that they're getting goose pimples, and that they're playing that famous music that would accompany all of Senna's wins on Brazilian television, that Hamilton laps the track. What's happening? Tell me. What a sight for sore eyes, someone says. Lewis Hamilton, this is everything you deserve. All right. So Ayrton Senna, his name is trending. Senna is trending. Why is Ayrton Senna trending along with Lewis Hamilton? Tell me, please. All right. So we're back with you. And there's another thing that's happening, and it's in Botswana, because the Botswana government has been in power for 58 years, the ruling government, for 58 years. And we're learning now that the country, Botswana, voters in Botswana have rejected the country's long-serving governing party in a result that marks a political earthquake in the diamond-rich southern African country. The Botswana Democratic Party, in power since independence in 1966, has won only 4 parliamentary seats as of Friday afternoon. It will be replaced by the Umbrella for Democratic Change, a UDC. Botswana, wow, that's quite something, because, Botswana has been doing very well. They've got serious reserves. I mean, you remember the time when I was working for the Botswana government? Remember, the people who've been with us here in this program for a long time will recall that time when I worked for the government of Botswana for years. And how that happened is that they had reached out to me because they had the economy was growing in a very, very fast way, and they were seeing strides, but they didn't have the human resources. They didn't have the skills in most of these sectors. And so it was my program that was used to put that information out, to ask people who were interested in going to Botswana to build and to rebuild Botswana. That was in 1990, 96, 97, 98, to rebuild Botswana. And so many people went. And I was also on that list, which I was going to go to set up radio stations and da-da-da-da. Well, it turned out that I didn't go. And it wasn't because they didn't want me. It's just, you make change. You make decisions and you change your minds and so on. But I remember how wealthy Botswana was at that time. And, the pay, the remuneration, the housing, and even to this day, Botswana is doing pretty well. So to see this change, I'm going to have to go now and look at Botswana to see what's happening there to make the people reject Botswana in the way that, not Botswana, but the governing party. For 58 years, that party has been ruling in Botswana. So we're going to check that, all right? All right, so let me go back to the phone lines because my brother, Kwame Pianke, is standing by. Kwame Pianke, a Pan-African and geopolitical analyst, on the phone lines. Kwame, good morning. Greetings. How are you doing, my brother?
I'm fine. Good morning, my cousin Kabu. How are you this morning?
I am well, as long as you two are well. Did you hear about Botswana?
Yeah, I heard about it. I haven't read the details of it. I'm trying to remember the president's name. It's been there for a long
I think
time.
it's a Sisi. Is it Masisi or something to that? Masisi, I think it is.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I did hear about it. I haven't read any details about it. It's interesting what's going on in Southern Africa. Period. There's a lot of changes going on. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of interest, particularly from the U.S. government in Southern Africa. But we can discuss that further
another time.
Coming up.
But
it's part of this election campaign. South Africa.
That's
true. Huge part.
That's true. So let's come forward to that in a little while. I want to start because we're looking at the U.S. elections from a geopolitical perspective through a Pan-African lens. And in this segment of the program, we want to talk about America's foreign policies and so on, and where do we, as African people, wherever we are in the world, how are we to view these elections and how do the U.S. policies impact us? But before we go there, I want you to help us to understand two things first, Kwame. One is when we talk about voting down ballot, what does that mean? And the other is American elections, how different they are in terms of who chooses the president and the role of the Electoral College, if you're
voting down ballot means, for instance, if you could skip over, up ballot is the presidential and the senatorial races. So if the way the ballot's structured, you have the presidential races, and you have the senatorial candidates, and then you have the U.S. Congressional House candidates. Then after that, you have state senate, state house, your county judges, your county commissioners, and then you have your local city representatives, city council, things of that nature. So voting down ballot means that people are skipping the presidential race or skipping the senatorial races. And that's what happened in 2016. Even though Hillary Clinton garnered, say, 90% of black support, a lot of black people didn't vote for her, didn't vote, period, and a lot of black people voted down ballot. In fact, in Michigan, they said it was 10,000 people in primarily black areas that did not vote in the presidential election that swung the election to Donald Trump during that time period. So that's a voting down ballot.
How would that for
10 or 100,000? I forget, but something like that.
Yeah. How for Jamaicans? How would this correspond to voting in Jamaica in terms of who we're voting for? Would it be like the mayors?
Yeah, Jamaica's different because the impression I get is that Jamaican, you vote by party, right? So if you vote for, say in your area, JLP or PMP, MP in your area, then that vote goes to essentially the leader of whoever party that is. So essentially, not
really. It's a similar thing.
Not really. Am I wrong?
Yeah, because in terms of the electoral college, I looked at the electoral college, and we're going to talk about it in a moment. Because
that's
we don't.
Jamaica. Yeah, that's how Jamaica goes. Yeah.
Because we don't. Because the leader of the party is not chosen by the people. The leader is chosen by the party. So that even when the people go to vote, they're not really voting for the prime minister or for anybody. They're just voting party, and then it's the party itself, the delegates, who choose the leader of the party. So the people really have no say in who the prime minister is. I mean, well, little or no say in who the.
So there's no direct vote for the prime minister in Jamaica.
No,
that's the impression I got.
No, there's no direct vote for the prime minister. No.
Yeah, so here you vote for the president. However, that is not really a vote for the president. You're voting for the Electoral College representative to then vote for that president. To say, in your state, if you're voting for candidate A, and candidate A wins that state 51 to 49%, then all of the votes, it's not proportional, then 100% of those votes go to the Electoral College representative that's supposed to vote for the president that the 51% chose. You can say essentially it's a tyranny of the majority in that instance, right? So you need 270 electoral votes to win the election. Minimum 270 Electoral College votes to win the election, and really the Electoral College gave power to the South. Because during the slavery era, the southern states wanted enslaved Africans counted as 3/5 of a person in order to boost their electoral college power, right? Because they and then during the terror after Reconstruction, when black people were driven out of politics in the South, they still retained. Black people then considered 5/5 of a person, and they still retained that electoral college power, even though black people were disenfranchised from voting. What makes it interesting that in 1970 the House passed a constitutional amendment to get rid of the electoral college and replace it with the national popular vote, and essentially this was then filibustered by the Senate by both the Republicans and the Democrats. So Republicans and the Southern Democrats rejected that. The interesting thing about the electoral college, the House approving getting rid of the electoral college, was you had 184 Democrats and 154 Republicans that voted to approve it, 83% of the members. And the proposal was if a ticket got 40% of the popular vote or better, the winner, it was the winner and everybody should go home. However, there was some opposition to the electoral college being removed, even in later years during the Carter administration. Vernon Jordan thought that getting rid of the electoral college would get rid of black people's leverage in the voting system. So, for instance, if they try to get, if a candidate tries to get all of Ohio's electoral votes, you had to bring out 12 to 15% of the population that was black or African American. And so Vernon Jordan was what you say a consigliere of the Clintons. But I think looking back on say Malcolm X's Ballot or the Bullet speech, he would not have wanted to eliminate our leverage in election campaigns either. So in a twisted way, the electoral college has given leverage to black people in this election in Michigan, and Arab people in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, what are considered the Rust Belt states, or you could say the Great Lakes states.
I just want to remind our listeners, Kwame, that when you were on a few years ago, when that election, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, your analysis was spot on, because you pointed out that she wasn't going to win, and you kind of talked us through why she wouldn't win. So even though she won the popular vote, she still didn't win. And this, as you mentioned earlier, had to do with the Electoral College again.
Electoral College plus policies. What happened was the Clinton crime bill was, which was actually authored by Joe Biden, stuck in a lot of people's craw. And then she was caught taking donations from private prison companies, right, which she later returned after she was caught doing that. So the reason the Democratic Party is having so many issues in these elections, including in 2020 when they won, is particularly with the black vote, is the Clinton crime bill. And to a certain extent, the intervention in Libya. If you go into the barbershop, that upsets a lot of black people as well. And then you have the NAFTA. It sets a lot of people in general in the Rust Belt states. And again, it was George H.W. Bush who initially proposed NAFTA, but Bill Clinton carried it through. And subsequent administrations have signed on to every free trade deal that's basically deindustrialized the United States, or the final nail in the coffin of deindustrializing the United States. And black people are disproportionately dependent on manufacturing jobs in this country, probably to about 3 times the rate of our population here.
Another thing you said the last time you were on is that Clinton had totally ignored, was it Wisconsin or Michigan? And you said that was so arrogant, and that was also an indication for you that she would not have won because of how they treated the areas that they thought were their base then, and it was a shoe-in for them.
She was also in a conundrum. Every time she visited these states, her poll numbers went down.
Are there any similarities between how she's running, or she ran her campaign, and what you're seeing in terms of the particularly the black votes for Kamala?
The similarities is, even though Kamala is engaging these states more, talking to, say, my sons, talking to some of my friends. I mean, the black community is split in terms of voting for Kamala Harris. There's a very loud majority that is going to vote for Kamala, but there's also a very significant, should I say, silent minority that is going to ignore her altogether. They're not necessarily going to vote for Trump, right? They're either going to keep that ballot blank. I had a friend that wrote in his own name for the election. Which I still laugh at.
That's an idea. That's an idea.
Some people are going to vote for Jill Stein, particularly based on her interview with the Breakfast Club, where she basically destroyed the Democratic representative, our consultant, Angela Rye, right? And so it's split. I mean, talking to my sons, young people aren't feeling Kamala, right? I think it's more older folks, and just based on my observation where I live, where you have a plurality, and that's one of the hardest words for me to pronounce, of black people, you see fewer Harris-Waltz signs than you saw Biden-Harris signs 4 years ago, and then you saw Clinton signs in 2016. So I don't see the enthusiasm there. At least where I live. And then number two, the Democratic representatives and candidates have gone out of their way to offend the Arab population here in Michigan, so much so that Donald Trump got a big endorsement from Arab leaders in Dearborn, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit, and that's also where the headquarters of the Ford Motor Company is. And so I don't see how you can lose, say, a few 100,000 Arab votes, considering the margins in Michigan, and win the state. I really don't. In fact, Bill Clinton was here in a town called Muskegon, which is on the west side of the state. It's on the shore of Lake Michigan. And he basically was talking about the response in killing the Palestinians in proportion to what happened October 7th last year was justified. Which further offended the Arab population. And then in Kamala's first campaign trip to Michigan, when you had Palestinian protesters, she made her infamous "I'm speaking" statement, which to shut them up. And again, that was done at Metro Detroit Airport, which is again about 10 to 15 minutes away from Dearborn. So I think it's dire for her in Michigan, and I think.
Is it looking dire for her in other areas too? Because we're getting a barrage of information regarding polls, and you know how polls are. And just last night we're seeing a whole new reporting that she's surging ahead by like 2 points, which to me those are in the margin of error anyway. But
and are those national polls or are those swing state polls? And that really the national polls don't matter.
Right.
National polls absolutely don't matter. But if you're hearing what the private pollsters are saying, those are the pollsters that the candidates pay for information. So that's what matters. That's actionable intelligence from what I'm hearing, and for what has been leaked. She's having a lot of issues in the Rust Belt states, right? And even in Sun Belt, I want to call North Carolina Sun Belt, but say the southeastern states, she withdrew her advertising from North Carolina, because that is considered no longer winnable for her. So if you're looking at the private polling, it's not looking good. But I would say if those in Jamaica who really want to pay attention to what's going on, look up internal polls, find out who the most accurate pollsters have been. I think one is Atlas Intel, another one is Trafalgar, and find out what they're polling in the battleground states that matter. This election is dependent on 7 states. Anybody in any other state, really, their vote doesn't matter.
What are those states?
So Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, I believe Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. Now, Georgia, from what I hear, is going to go Trump. North Carolina, from what I understand, is going to go Trump. So she's really dependent on Arizona and Nevada, and I think I mentioned Nevada, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. She has to sweep the Great Lakes states to win.
And what's the likelihood, do you think, of her winning those?
I don't think it's likely. I really don't think it's likely. I could be wrong. I mean, things are volatile, but I heard. I think the percentage is very low that she'll sweep the Great Lakes states.
And I know we're going to go geopolitical in a moment, but just mop up some of the internal things. We noticed that they've called out the National Guards already, and that the conversation, a lot of conversations coming out, especially if you're watching the YouTube channels and on TikTok and those places, people are talking about the likelihood of violence. What's your own reading of the environment?
I don't know. The violence part, I would be kind of reticent to predict that. What I do see is I think you're going to have, depending on the results, a lot of people go into mental crisis. That I do see happening. And so what that is going to what is that going to manifest in? I have no idea. But I think you're going to have that. I think you're going to have a lot of mental. People having psychosis issues as a result of what happened on Wednesday. Because the way the media's built this up over the years and the emotions. I mean, I think this is what they want. They want people to be so emotionally tied to this, even though in a lot of instances there's very little difference between the candidates in terms of policy. That I just think there's going to be an emotional crisis among some people.
We're looking at this now through Pan-African lenses and looking at the policies of both parties, or both candidates, if you will, but definitely both parties, what they mean for us as African people, and what should be our thinking, even as we pay attention to the elections that are underway in the U.S. And underway is right, isn't it, Kwame? Because you voted already, the mail-in ballots and the early ballots. I mean, that's underway?
Yeah, it is underway. So early voting, we're in my state, in Michigan, and I think it ended yesterday, I believe. If it doesn't end today. So that ended. It'll be interesting to see what the turnout will be on Tuesday for that. But yes, so early voting has gone underway.
All right, what should we be mindful of as Pan-Africans as we look at these two candidates? The Jamaicans are very invested. Everywhere you go, you just go across the internet and see how countries are responding to this. People are very invested in this as if it is their election. And in a way, whatever happens, we are impacted and will be impacted. So let us talk about the global policies. First of all, regarding economics.
Regarding economics, well, one, what both parties agree on, they want to be more aggressive, or both candidates, they want to be more aggressive towards China, particularly when it comes to this quote-unquote new green economy. China has, controls most of the lithium stocks throughout the world and most of the rare earths throughout the world. Now, this really winds up directly affecting the Caribbean because one of those rare earths is iridium. And Jamaica's neighbor to the get my geography right,
yes,
to the east, Haiti has the second largest iridium deposits in the world, right? So both parties are interested in that. I know there was a video that a Haitian gentleman made a couple months ago claiming to show that U.S. troops were mining iridium there. I don't know. I don't know if that can be confirmed or not. But we know somebody like Elon Musk, who's a Trump supporter, is very interested in iridium for whatever his SpaceX things, his Neuralink satellites, his Tesla cars, things of that nature. So Haiti is number one with a bullet in the Caribbean region in terms of the rivalry between China in the United States. Plus, you have the ports in Haiti and the passageway between Haiti and Jamaica, and the natural harbors and things of that nature. So that corridor, the Haitian-Jamaican corridor, Cuban corridor, is going to be part of the great rivalry between China and the United States.
We remember that meeting between China, Xi Jinping and Biden. and when all those questions, I mean, a lot said behind Xi Jinping's back, but then when he was scheduled to arrive, when they were scheduled to meet, and the questions arose as to whether or not he was a dictator, for example. We saw how they played that down, and one person answered the question from Biden's team that China is a communist country, and another person said, well, China is one party, and and Biden himself refused to go down the dictator line. So there is this relationship that America is aware of, that they have to forge with China. It seems to me how they do it is going to be interesting. Is there a big difference between how the Republicans under Trump see this as opposed to the Democrats under Kamala?
No, not at all. Because they're both going to ramp up the military exercises in Asia to force China to use resources, the military resources in those areas. Biden has kept the Trump tariffs against China. As much as Kamala is complaining about the Trump tariffs, the Biden administration has kept the Trump tariffs against China, particularly when it comes to EVs, electrical vehicles. Right? So there's no difference between the two. Trump just barks a little bit louder than Kamala when it comes to China.
Is Elon Musk? How does Elon Musk factor into this EV discussion and the fact that
Elon Musk is interesting because he was a solid Democratic Party supporter. He supported Biden in the last election. Then suddenly switches over to Trump, and he says that he stands to lose a lot of money if Trump loses this election. Elon Musk again is back. We're back to the lithium. You need lithium to run the electrical vehicle batteries as currently constructed. And I remember he was supportive of the coup that overthrew Evo Morales in Bolivia. And what's interesting is going on now, even though the guy that's currently president in Bolivia is part of Evo Morales' party, there was a shooting from the presidential side to get rid of Evo Morales. So we're back to the lithium wars in Bolivia again, right? And so Elon Musk is very much interested in these green materials. The other one is Peter Thiel, another Trump supporter who has South African roots, who runs a company called Palantir, who runs basically AI and database contracts for the Pentagon. And his Palantir Corporation is used by Israel to prosecute the war against the Palestinians. So Thiel's a big Trump supporter. However, his CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, gave $360,000 to the Biden campaign. And Alex Karp has been talking about they need to ramp up the war machine against China. So there's really no difference when it comes to the China policy. There's going to be slight differences when it comes to the Africa policy. Trump, the people that support Trump, particularly J. Peter Pham, who's the creator of AFRICOM. He was an advisor to Bush, an advisor to Obama. Now he's a advisor to Trump and is expected to get a post in administration. They want to stop this whole social justice warrior view of the Democrats. So basically, they want to say no more promotion of LGBT rights in Africa, because it's hurting certain U.S. policies in Africa. And they also said that they no longer want to offend and publicly berate the Sahel countries because they have lost the Sahel countries as allies. And this is coming from Peter Pham, and there's another guy named Tibor Nagy who said that again, that they want to take a different tack. They want the U.S. Relationship with Africa to be transactional, and that's very much up Trump's alley. Everything.
Isn't that slightly different? Isn't that slightly different from? Isn't that slightly different? Oh, you did say that they're looking at Africa in a slightly different way than normal. But is this how the Democrats are seeing it also, or are they more committed?
No, not at all. I think they still want it. Well, it's interesting. They're talking out of both sides of their mouth. Kamala has two main advisors. And one is named Rebecca Lisner, and I'm trying to remember the other guy's name, who wrote books basically saying that they can no longer. There's an article called "Preparing for a Less Arrogant America." So Rebecca Lisner has basically said that they have to accommodate, in their words, autocratic and illiberal regimes in order so the U.S. can still have access to the minerals, and that and they're using some word saying there's a phrase called accessible global commons. Mm-hmm. And they say America is the only country that can guarantee an open system, whatever that's supposed to mean. Mm-hmm. So essentially, to me, that's another way of saying we want access to Africa's minerals, and we can't be so aggressive with some of these social, social constructs the U.S. is trying to push on African countries. Although policy-wise, currently in the Biden administration, that does not appear to be the case.
Right, and this could be a response to China, couldn't it? They have met China in Africa. Yes, China and Russia,
and then the Biden administration has proposed something of the Libido corridor in Angola. So they want to build a $4 billion project from the port of Libido in Angola to mineral-rich Zambia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And oh, by the way, Peter Pham, Trump's advisor, is an advisor to the Congolese government. Very interesting. Very interesting. Whether that railway gets built, I am doubtful, because the U.S. has not been spending hard assets in Africa. So whether Congress would approve that $4 billion is another story. That I do not know.
And we still do not know. And we still do not know why Ivanka Trump went to Sierra Leone. And this thing bothers me.
This is news to me. I didn't know she went there.
She went under her father's administration when he was president. I mean, she did a whole thing to Sierra Leone, and it's pretty interesting, because I think it may be connected to the chocolate and that whole thing. But it worries me, and so. But I'm watching to see how that plays out. But the would you say
and
that
there's also a lot of Israeli interest in Sierra Leone in terms of mining? Let's not forget that. And remember, Ivanka's husband, Jared Kushner, is Jewish. Mm-hmm. So, that I think that also has, I think it has
there's a connection.
It has, more of a mining connection than a chocolate connection.
Okay, all right. Good point. So that the America's policy, either way, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, whether it's China or Africa, the policy remains the same, because they talk about America's interest, first of all. Yeah. And are we seeing, what does that mean when they say America's interest? If America's interest is threatened, then they're there. But what does America's interest mean?
America has to have access to African raw materials in order to catch up to China in terms of technological advances. As much as as much as America's credited with creating the internet and the chip industry and things of that nature, China's really advanced in terms of chips. China's really advanced in terms of electrical vehicles. Most of the computers are made in China, Taiwan, in those areas. Particularly, and I'm trying to remember the name of the company now. I can't remember the name of the company, but Apple contracts their computer making out to a Chinese company. Mm-hmm. And so America's really lost a lot of that advantage. One, they've offshored a lot of the industry. Two, American children are mechanically disinclined because they've taken vocational training out of the schools. Mm-hmm. I took in junior high school, I took welding, I took carpentry, I took drafting in high school, I took electronics in high school. And you no longer have those classes in a high school. You have to go out to a central location. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons Haitians were being asked to come to Ohio is because Haitians know how to work with their hands, where Americans don't. And plus, you're dealing with the opioid drug crisis in a lot of these rural Midwestern communities and rural Southern communities. And I've seen this personally. One of my jobs is to travel to plants. And see this. I've traveled to plants within the United States and to Mexico and to Canada, right? So, and you do have a huge crisis when it comes to available workers. And I've been told by plant management that their biggest problem is dealing with the opioid crisis among the personnel.
Wow.
So America is at a distinct technical disadvantage when it comes to China.
Exactly.
When it comes to Mexico.
Yeah.
When it comes to Haitians who have skills.
Because we see
And
how
those,
China is.
those patients in Ohio will never be deported. I, as much as Trump is talking about that, that is not going to happen because the business they're being hired by the automotive companies in those areas, and they will. And Ohio right now is a Republican state. If Trump wants his agenda passed, he is not going to offend those interests in Ohio.
So when we're listening to the two candidates speaking and hearing them, prevaricating on the platitudinous perorations, for us as African people and for us in the developing world, there are certain things that we should be focused on, and if we have lobbying power, then I suppose you have some power in the halls of Congress and so on, but that we do not have, so that. In terms of the, and we said economics first of all, and let me just broaden it a bit now to talk about how America deals with security, because we have AFRICOM that you referenced just now. We have the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, and I think they have two more things coming up so far. Yet we have guns coming across the border and drugs coming across the border just the same.
But the U.S. refuses to sign up to a small arms embargo, and that's why all the guns are coming into Haiti. And frankly, I think all the guns are coming into Jamaica. Yeah,
exactly. I agree with you. And then to say, but this happens whether it's Republican or Democrat. It really doesn't matter who's there.
Yes. And to me, this has been a policy since the 1970s. There's a great book that was written in the early 80s called Trilateralism by Holly Sklar. And that should be in every, Caribbean person's or Jamaican's library, right? Because Jamaica is front and center in the book in terms of what Zbigniew Brzezinski did and Trilateral Commission did and the Council of Foreign Relations did to destabilize Jamaica, right? And so this strategy is still being played out 50 years later. And they're taking the Jamaican strategy and applying it to Haiti.
Repeat the name of the book?
Trilateralism. And the author is Holly Sklar. And I read that back in the late 80s, early 90s, right? And kind of shows you how different school was different. When I was I graduated high school in the mid-80s, but one of my family friends, she was saying her high school teacher told her about the Trilateral Commission. Can you imagine that? That would never be taught in schools.
No.
Right?
And another thing we can do is to... Sorry to interrupt, Kwame, but another thing we can do to back up what you just said about the book is to watch the film Life and Debt by Life and DEBT. Stephanie is the producer of that.
I will give my kids my two oldest children their high school credit. They had to watch that film in high school.
Yes. It is.
So I do have to give credit for that.
Yeah,
yes.
we should all watch it, and it is available. I think you can see it now on YouTube and so on. So please, because it's Stephanie Black, and it looks at, it's a documentary looking at the ways that the policies of the Bretton Woods institutions, which of course are headed by the United States, for the most part, the World Bank, the IMF, and so on, and other aid agencies, how those policies affected the Jamaican economy. But these very same policies are still in place for us, because now they have put on us a neoliberal agenda. And this is the very same agenda that we see not just in the Caribbean, and I'm talking about across the Caribbean, and we see them trying to force it now on Guyana. I'm not sure if it is forced or Guyana is reaching out for it. But also we see this on the continent of Africa. And so I want to go to what you referenced earlier as far as that agenda is concerned, with what we saw happening in South Africa's election, and how you're reading Botswana.
Well, South Africa elections is basically subtly the Biden administration, from based on what I'm reading between the lines, was given some tacit support to the DA, the Democratic Alliance, to force that merger between them, or the coalition between them and the ANC. Where Trump is going to be different is that they're openly talking about punishing South Africa for not being supportive of the United States. one of the main people about talking about punishing South Africa is a black Republican congressman here named John James, who ironically is the only black representative from the state of Michigan. It's the first. Michigan has the lowest representation of black representatives in 50-something years, despite it being a Democratic Party state. So John James is openly talking about punishing South Africa for not being supportive enough of the United States foreign policy goals, be it in Israel and possibly when it comes to BRICS, right? So what we're going to see is, again, a more of a transactional, you wash my hand or you wash my back, and I may put a little bit of water in your back if you support my agenda. Now, I'm going to be a one chord musician here. I say the best thing that folks in the Caribbean could do is build up their technical capacity. And I'll say that in Africa, we have to be able to make finished goods out of our raw materials. Now, the countries I see doing that in Africa are the Sahel states. They're building up their industrial capacity. Ethiopia as well.
I'm going to take a break, Kwame. But what I want to talk about briefly, within the context of what you just said, is to what extent the trade deals, some of these trade deals that the Caribbean, whether it's bilateral arrangements with the U.S. or CARICOM arrangements, and Africa, the Africa Union, and bilateral arrangements, to what extent they have entered into trade deals with the United States as part of the America's foreign policy that put caps on some of these very solutions that you are referring to. So let me take a quick break. Geopolitical analyst, Pan-African analyst Kwame Pianke, and we're looking at the U.S. elections through a Pan-African lens from a geopolitical perspective, talking about how and what does it mean for us as African people, regardless of what the outcome will be on November 5 or 6 after the U.S. elections. And the point you raised, Kwame, as we were going into the break, and the question I posited was to say, one of the solutions is, as African peoples, whether we're in the Caribbean or continental Africa, that we have to look within and to develop skills and manufacturing and so on. And the point I raised was, to what extent are some of these solutions stymied by the very trade and investment deals that individual countries or as a bloc might have entered into with, whether it's America or the European Union, but definitely with the United States?
Well, the big thing is like the subsidies that, the Caribbean countries and African countries are forced to get rid of their agricultural subsidies, whereas the EU and the United States and Canada can still subsidize their agriculture and dump cheap goods, cheap, unnutritional agricultural goods into the Caribbean. So basically, I think years ago I heard the average age of the Jamaican farmer is 70 years old, right? There's no way a country could be independent without agriculture. There's a saying: there's no culture without agriculture, right? And so what you have, you continue to force people into the cities. You have a crime issue now because of it. Because it's better to have rural poverty because you can go out and kill your food, right? Whereas urban poverty, you kill for your food, right? So this is. It's going to have to be a conscious effort among the populace to buy local agricultural goods, and it's going to have to be a conscious effort among the producers to form co-ops to reduce the cost of their inputs. Right now, in the Jamaican context, particularly, they're at a disadvantage again because of the IMF deals with the utility rates, the power rates. So would it behoove Jamaican business people or entrepreneurs to link up with Trinidadian entrepreneurs because their electricity rates are lower for certain things that need to be manufactured and form joint ventures? So folks are going to have to get creative when it comes to this. Because the countries that are going to survive in this next era with a declining United States, and we can get into why whoever is elected president is really, that is not going to be a gift. It's actually going to be a curse. that, to compete in this new world, you're going to have finished goods. You're going to have to build up your technical skills. People in these countries where the educational system does not support a true development are going to have to start Saturday schools, start apprentice programs, where children can start going out with carpenters and welders and mechanics and architects and things of that nature to start learning skills and seamstresses. Things so these are the populace themselves are going to have to take their fate into their own hands because the politicians are not going to do it. And just my observation of the Jamaican politicians, very few have technical backgrounds and very few are true entrepreneurs.
Yes, and we just saw a change in the Minister of Education. The new minister, I do not know, and I've made it. I made a commitment to go and look her up and see who she is. But I know that she was initially and still is a minister with responsibility for information, artificial intelligence, and those kinds of things, and computer involvement. I mean, so she was doing all of that. And obviously, so that would have been her background then. I'm thinking, because I really don't know what her background is. But I thought about this to say, obviously, we have to take education into another direction because we're still very archaic. We're still chalk and talk in a lot of the classrooms. Yep. So that I hope that some of what you've said here, that we'll see that in the coming months being rolled out in the schools, even as pilots, in the school, a different kind of way of doing education, because we're so wrong about it. One of the things you said, Kwame.
Yeah, and I'm going to sound contradictory. I think there's an overemphasis of computers in the schools.
Overemphasis
right, because there's an overemphasis of computers in the schools because it teaches kids to be consumers of computers as opposed to producers of computers. So how many of these classrooms are you actually building computers? Are you developing software? Are you doing programming?
And I think this is the point. This is the point I'm making, because we see this happening, for example, at Yorkcastle High School. We see this. Chronix is involved in teaching coding, facilitating the teaching of coding at UE and so on. And so, but there's not enough of that. And I hope that if she comes in, well, she's already there, that she will take education into that direction where we are creating, we're building, we're making our own, we're ideating, and we're not just dependent on what's coming to us as literally garbage, if to use that word that everybody's throwing around, from developing countries.
This is where it's also important to bring back electronics education, because in high school we'd have to solder, capacitors and solder, resistors and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And you still, the motherboard in a laptop or the motherboard in a computer, that still requires that. So how can you change the circuitry to do that, right? Mm-hmm. My son built his own server.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things we've seen
this is very possible. One, you have to believe in yourself. Two, we have to stop. At least in the United States, too many black people are intimidated by math, even though we are the creators of mathematics, right? And so we have to embrace math and embrace it in creative ways. Like, for instance, the great jazz artist Donald Byrd, before he died, he wanted to create a program here in Detroit called Music is Math and Math is Music. Mm-hmm. And so you can use people's interest in music and beats and things of that nature to create an interest in math. Yeah. Nature is math. I mean,
those discussions, and I tell you, these are discussions that these discussions have happened on the ground here in Jamaica, and I think some of them have also been implemented in terms of teaching maths through one of the strategic interventions that we had here at Area FM, if you remember, in the early 2000s, was the Write It RITE and Write It RIGHT, it making literacy Area, and that's exactly what we did, was to use music to teach math and English and other subjects, actually, but we're focusing mainly on math, and how we got the DJs involved and the artists involved and the musicians involved. So that was a massive project that at some point during that project we needed sponsorship and support, carried it to the Ministry of Education, but they turned it down, and the private sector also turned it down. So this is where we are as a people in terms of how we're thinking. I want to move on quickly, Kwame, to look at energy and security and ensuring how we ensure access to strategic energy resources, because that is something I know you talk about a lot. But and then we're looking at this in terms of, once again, America's global policies, as those policies concern the developing countries, particularly the Caribbean, Jamaica, and continental Africa. And what's been America's policy? Because Africa has all the mineral resources, but here we are.
Yes. America's policy has been to prevent energy independence in the black world. Now, I'm going to say this with some sort of nuances, right? It seems like during the first Trump administration, they opposed the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, and then the Biden administration still has opposed it. But now you're seeing the change among Trump's advisors saying they should allow Ethiopia back into the African Growth and Opportunities Act. So I don't know if there's going to be a change, particularly in terms of specifically in terms of Ethiopia, when it comes to that, right? And what quid pro quo has to be done in order for them to do that, right?
I think, and I remember what you're saying, but I think that is directly related to China and how China jumped in to assist Ethiopia with this project when America tried to kill it with their relationship with Egypt and Israel. And that was connected back also to the Sahara, to that Western Sahara country.
And then Trump's advisors are talking about a recognition of Somaliland, which would further inflame Ethiopia and Eritrea. And it's kind of interesting how Ethiopia and Eritrea, their foreign policies have now linked up after years of having that war with each other. So it's kind of interesting what has happened. Yeah. When it comes to the Caribbean, it's a hodgepodge. Obviously, Trinidad is more energy independent, but this is something I'll say, and it may offend some of the partisans in Jamaica, but Jamaica is suffering because of its original sin of scuttling the West Indies Federation, right? And that was both parties. Buster Manley directly scuttling it, and Norman Manley's only giving a tacit support to it.
One from 10 leaves 0.
Exactly. So Jamaica, because of that, you can't have a unified policy in terms of energy independence. You can't have a unified policy in terms of protecting your trade routes with some sort of navy, right? And so basically each country is isolated. And here you have Jamaica with all these natural gas deposits getting LNG. And I saw this person when I was in Jamaica last time. There were guys at the hotel I'm at that were doing LNG, that were working on LNG projects, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing about LNG, you have to take that natural gas from another country, ship it on a ship where you're paying the oil prices to ship that on a ship, and then use the labor to install it and hook it up into the system, into the Jamaica system. So it's much more expensive as opposed to developing your own natural gas deposits offshore. And obviously there's oil offshore in Jamaica. And to me, the question is, how does Jamaica create the leverage so they can get the best deal for energy independence? That one I don't have an answer to. Is Jamaica so weak in its negotiating position with China, that it can't get a good deal out of China, and is it so weak in its negotiating position with the United States that it can't basically create a rivalry between the two to get the best deal?
Maybe the answer to that lies in Petro-Carib and Chavez. Because that was a chance to be the energy at least sufficient and independent ultimately, but we ourselves sabotaged ourselves to show our loyalty to America's foreign policy, which was to disrespect Chavez and disrespect that whole Petro-Carib situation.
Exactly. Yes, that's a great point. And Haiti just recently did that too in the past year or so.
So what? And the question is, so why? Because, and this takes us back to it doesn't matter who wins, because whether it's Kamala or or Donald Trump, their foreign policies regarding us remain the same. And this has been so for the very longest time.
And this is back to Malcolm's Ballard Bullet speech. One is the wolf, one is the fox. Who would you rather deal with?
I don't have a choice in that, and I'm not making one. So go back to the point you're making. To be self-sufficient, it's hard to be. So we have to develop strategic partnerships. Jamaica has, you and I, we've had many. We have hundreds of discussions on leveraging China-Jamaican relations, because we recognized that China coming with their soft power diplomacy wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was up to us to leverage it. I don't know.
I'll give an example of the highway. That was one of the worst negotiations I have ever seen. Right? You have a highway that's essentially running from Kingston to the North Coast, and to me, if I were negotiating, I would have designed a spoke and wheel system where the highway's coming from the rural areas, connecting with main veins, so it's easier to move goods from the rural areas to the city, and therefore you're encouraging agriculture, and you're also de-urbanizing places like Kingston and Mo Bay that would alleviate the crime problem, right? Not only that, again, you have a lot of great Jamaican technical talent, not only in Jamaica, but outside of Jamaica. And I did, from my observation right on that north-south highway, the road was not graded properly. There are not enough drains per linear foot or linear meter, right? And I think there are water issues as a result, right? So it was a poor negotiation, and they gave away the leverage. And this has been look what's going on in Kingston now. You see these Chinese high rises going up in residential neighborhoods that can't handle the sewage.
Mm-hmm. There is, so for us, there is a dearth of ideating, I think, and of confidence and recognizing who we are. That fight, I think, that is gone out of us, with Paul Bogle and them, and maybe up to the 1930s. But so what we have now is that we have become lackeys of the United States. They don't really have to issue serious sanctions on us or anything anymore, because we totally have been absorbed into the U.S. So that the U.S.
Here, I want to tell you how far it's gone downhill. Malcolm X had a great speech a week and a half before his death in Rochester, New York, called "Not Just an American Problem," and he talked about the reason why the U.S. gave support for the civil rights movement was they had to be able to show African countries that were becoming independent during that time period that, hey, we're a friendly face, because they were competing with Russia or the Soviet Union at the time, right? And that was an eye-opener. And then that led me to a book called Cold War Civil Rights that had the actual documents from the U.S. State Department saying that we have to show some progress for Black Americans in order to keep our access to African materials. And during that time period, they quoted a Jamaican ambassador, even though Jamaica wasn't independent yet, complaining about the treatment of Black people in the United States. So those brave people in the 50s and 60s have gone. Now, granted, Jamaica's been terrorized for the past 50 years, right? Jamaica has too much access to American television, which also reduces their confidence, right? And so there has to be a conscious choice now for parents in the home. Take your children's phones away. They can only be limited to a certain hour, certain amount of time, and see what they're viewing. Reduce the access to the television. Have pictures of Black people in your house, right? Emphasize African history, right? And so because that confidence is only going to come from a grassroots effort. It is not going to come from the government.
And to look at our communities, how we build our families and how we build our communities. I want to finally look, as we talk about the U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis the elections and how these impact us as a people, to look at some of the things that we already have in place and to ask ourselves, to what extent are these working? Because we have, in the Caribbean. We have the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, which they're talking about regional security. And we just pointed out the extent to which the guns are coming in, the drugs are coming in. It doesn't matter. The borders are still porous. They turn a blind eye. Then we have the Caribbean Energy Security Initiative. We have the U.S. Caribbean Strategic Engagement Act. We have the Caribbean Disaster Resilience and Recovery Plan. We have the Organization of American States and the Caribbean Support Program. Regionally, we have the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit, and we see the African leaders going there and with their begging bowls, and the Caribbean people doing the same thing, Caribbean leaders. We have a Caribbean U.S. Summit. We have a Africa Union U.S. Memorandum of Understanding. We have a Caribbean Community, which is CARICOM U.S. Memorandum of Understanding. We have a different bilateral initiatives, the U.S.-Nigeria Strategic Partnership, the U.S.-South Africa Strategic Dialogue, the U.S.-Jamaica Partnership, the U.S.-Haiti Strategic Partnership, and all of these things that we have with the United States. We do not have them with the Republican Party or with the Democratic Party. These are partnerships, agreements that we have signed on to with the United States. Why?
Yeah, because what people don't understand is that who runs the United States are the oligarchs, and they run the United States. They run and they influence the political system, not just with money, but through the think tanks they control, like the Council on Foreign Relations, like the Atlantic Council, like the German Marshall Fund, like in Britain the Chatham House, things of that nature. So no matter if they're Republican or Democrat, they belong to the same think tanks. There might be slight differences in tactical approaches, but in terms of strategy, the strategic interests are the same. So and the smart countries realize that. And, I'll go back to the Sahel countries. The way those guys, the Sahel countries speak, they are reading the think tank reports. And they're formulating their strategies accordingly. And if they're able to get terrorism in those countries in line, you watch the U.S. will create a better deal that's beneficial for them than it will be for the Caribbean, because those countries decide to stand up and develop their resources.
Hold the line for me, please. Very good point. Gardens. It will be Marcia Griffiths and Friends, featuring live performances by Shaggy, Busy Signal, Tanya Stevens, Elaine, Tesson Chin, Dean Sutherland, Dwayne Stevenson, Brick and Lace, among others. Music will be provided by the Jamaica All-Star Band, IRFM's Muta Baruka, Colin Hines, Kurt Riley, and Richie Clark. Gates open at 3 o'clock. Showtime is 6 p.m. It's a journey. Remember, Marcia says it's a journey. And they're going to start at 6. So get your tickets now at marciagriffiths.com and also at Caribtix, CARIBTIX, Caribtix.com. And you can get physical tickets, can be purchased at Jamaica Pegasus Lobby and Music Mart in Kingston, Fontana Pharmacy and Fesco in Mandeville, Double Scoops in Albion St. Thomas, Gina's Pharmacy in Portmore, and Total Gas Station here in Ocho Rios. I'll see you there. We're heading there right after this program because we can't afford to miss Marcia Griffiths and Friends at all. Speaking with geopolitical analyst, Pan-African analyst Kwame Pianke, as we look beyond and within the U.S. elections, looking at the geopolitical concerns for us as African people. We're looking through a Pan-African lens at the geopolitical issues. And so far we can agree, Kwame, that for us, it's a whole different consideration as a people, not Republican or Democrats, but how to move ourselves forward. And I'm going to leave the next few minutes to you to help us with some of the solutions, which you've been touching on throughout the program, as to how do we go forward and understanding what we now know, that it doesn't matter who wins this election, Trump or Kamala, Democrat or Republican, it really doesn't matter for us as African people, economically or any other clay. So where do we go from here?
You have to remember, the president is no more than a manager, and he's not even a mid-manager in the way the system is created in the United States, right? And so you can't get so emotionally tied up in terms of the personalities when it comes into that. But I'm just going to repeat myself. The first thing again is confidence. Mm-hmm. The self-confidence needs to come back, and things have to be eliminated that reduce your self-confidence. Mm-hmm. And I've already said that already. That's the television, and that's the constant access to the phone, mm-hmm. especially with when it comes to the children. We are now going to have to not only work hard, but work smart in developing our our scientific capacity. And I use that word scientific because that's what Garvey kept on emphasizing over and over. Scientific development is the key to power. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm going to say again, Saturday schools, it's time to start doing workshops with children on the weekend, finding mm-hmm. projects to do with their hands. There's plenty of kits out there to build your own drones, right? Mm-hmm. Start doing those projects now to increase the technical the capacity of the children. And then people need to be pulling their money together to buy plots of land to start doing farming, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And then changing some, like say if you're collecting herbs, start building dehydrators to turn those herbs into some sort of finished goods. And I know a lot of Jamaicans are doing that already, so I'm not mm-hmm. saying that's anything new. Mm-hmm. But the emphasis has to be on finished goods. No longer can other countries come in and to say, let's take your raw materials and where can you convert it to finished goods? Because mm-hmm. the economic value add and the benefit to a society is having the technical capacity to change your raw materials into finished goods.
Mm-hmm. I want you to take a minute or two, Kwame, to talk about the need to build regional partnerships. We know we have CARICOM, but it's interesting how CARICOM functions. And is it enough? What's your thinking?
No, it's not. I think the partnerships need to go on with the continent of Africa, the progressive Africans on the continent, and I'm not just talking countries only. It's currently constructed. Ghana is not a progressive country, but if you can find progressive people in the country of which to do business with and to collaborate with, that would be beneficial. Could you find people to do business with and collaborate with in the Sahel countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger? Mm-hmm. Those partnerships need to be explored. In Ethiopia, considering Jamaica's connection to Ethiopia as well, those need to be explored from the grassroots level. Mm-hmm. Now, there needs to be encouragement of the legislatures to make sure those relationships are facilitated, but it needs to start at the grassroots level.
Mm-hmm. And how important is it for us to know and to be aware, to be cognizant? Because we talk about cognitive dissonance this morning, and I think this is one of the issues we have regarding our relationship with the United States. But how important is it for that, knowing that the United States is not, the foreign policy isn't going to change with elections, that the United States is not coming to save us, and then to move on to what we need to do? Because it seems to me that we are not going to move on some of these self-reliance things that you brought up just now and the solutions you're preferring to us, unless we begin to understand that, and to put it bluntly, the U.S. is not our friend.
No, it's not, and the U.S. is in a desperate position, right? I was just watching a report this morning. The banks are reporting 7 times the unrealized losses that they did in 2008. The United States is in the middle of a bond crisis. Even though the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates, the yields on interest rates have gone up. Mm-hmm. So again, the next president is basically inheriting a disaster, mm-hmm. right? And so you're going to have a more aggressive United States, because it is fighting for its survival, mm-hmm. and in negotiations you have to be able to realize how that position works.
Mm-hmm. Those are that very same aggression.
Position that you're, I wouldn't say adversary is the word necessarily, but your negotiating partner is in.
Mm-hmm. Because that same aggression, that same aggressiveness that you speak about, is the same aggressiveness that I think the U.S. has been using on developing countries in terms mm-hmm. of the power, the military might that they've brought to Africa through AFRICOM and the Caribbean Security Initiative.
Yes, but again, because a few countries decided to stand up, it seems like they're going to take at least a slightly different approach in terms of Africa, because a few countries decided to stand up.
It is all right.
The Caribbean is not going to improve if you have the current leadership that constantly genuflects whoever the negotiating partners is, and that's just not the United States. That includes China. You have the Caribbean leadership is weak. There's no ands or buts about that. It's weak leadership.
Yeah. Do you see how does BRICS play into all of this? We spoke about BRICS last week.
Well, in theory, BRICS should give you another partner in terms of negotiations. But what I'm more concerned about is the failure of the Caribbean countries to adapt to what's going on in terms of currencies, in terms of what their reserves are in their central banks. A lot of these BRICS countries are building up gold into their central banks to protect themselves against the higher interest rates of U.S. Treasuries. And what happens is I'm not seeing that in the Caribbean countries. Even though Jamaica began mining gold recently, are they requiring as part of the royalty some of that gold going into the central bank?
Well, they said they didn't. They said they're not mining gold.
It was in the Observer.
Well,
I mean, the company that's mining gold is connected to the Stewart family.
The minister with responsibility says that it's not happening, and when it's happening, then we will know. I'm just saying.
So he's saying the Observer and the Gleaner are lying when it comes to that, even though
I'm just
they
saying.
interviewed the two companies mining the gold.
It's a commercial station, so I'm just balancing the conversation.
I know. I just find it amazing. Like the same minister said there was no oil either. Even though the oil company had a oil exploration company had a video saying that they're exploring oil.
Well,
I don't know what's going on there. What are they trying to say? Are they trying to hide the fact that the resources are there?
We probably need to see.
Being promised
No, we need to look
else?
at the companies that are involved and the connections to whoever they're connected to, similar to the FinSAC situation. But that's a whole other
Absolutely
story.
Amazing. It's almost telling you can't believe your lying eyes.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
So, in wrapping up, Kwame, so the elections are well on the way. I hope that by the way, this conversation has been very sobering. Just let me tell you that. I'm getting lots of texts coming in, lots of responses. And for the most part, 99% literally, people are saying it is sobering, and they're using various words to describe this very same thought, which is this is a very sobering conversation, because you get excited about the fact that there's a Jamaican who there's a woman whose father is Jamaican who is
running. Yeah, let's put it that way, because she's really not all that connected to Jamaica. Let's be honest about that. But
no, she hasn't been connected to Jamaica at all. But no, I think yes, I remember she was at the Washington D.C. The Washington, what do you call it, High Commission, the Jamaican High Commission Embassy in Washington, and she was wearing or she was standing beside the Jamaican flag, and she said, "Wagwan man, wapum," and she was speaking at an event that was a Jamaican event, and she really claimed her Jamaican heritage. She's been here as a child and so on. So let's not take that away from her. But
okay.
But to say that, regardless of all of that, we had a lesson in Barack Obama. I lost so many friends in this space telling people that Obama wasn't going to change anything because Obama is just occupying the position with a name and a title of president, but without the power. And this will be the very same thing if Kamala wins, and it will be the same thing if Trump wins.
If Trump wins, exactly.
So the question:
the president is not a power position. The president is put in there by his donors. There's a great economist named Michael Hudson, and people should look him up. But he had a great saying that the role of a politician in the Western system is to deliver his constituents to his donors.
Well, there you go. So who runs America?
Oh boy! I mean, I could mention the names, but we could say the big early banking families, the big Massachusetts Brahmin families,
the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and so on.
The Rockefellers, the families nobody really talks about, the Harrimans. You're talking about the Whitneys. You're talking, those are some of the big, quote unquote, pilgrim families. The Rockefellers are not a pilgrim family, but some of those pilgrim families.
So what about companies like Blackstone and Vanguard and?
Yeah, Blackstone supports Trump. BlackRock supports Harris, although
BlackRock,
the CEO of although the CEO of BlackRock came out of Blackstone. The CEO of BlackRock says it doesn't matter who wins the election. Their agenda is going to be, Larry Fink is going to be covered. However, BlackRock gathers investments for their rich clients. So Larry Fink is just a face. He is not the owner. Right. So the owners are the people. Like, for instance, they say Vanguard is one of the big investors in BlackRock, and according to one article I read, you have a lot of British royal types who are big investors in Vanguard. Right. And so again, it's the owner of capital in the that runs the United States.
Right. And of course, the World Economic Forum isn't hiding anything. So, they tend to tell you what's about to come, and they give you a good 5 year in advance. We're not,
they do. Exactly.
We're not reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, it is sobering, but sometimes cold water to the face is eye opening.
At least it wakes you up. At least it wakes you up.
It wakes you up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for this discourse. Really appreciate your time as usual, Kwame. By the way, lots of questions to us to how people can get in contact with you.
Oh boy, how can I get in contact with me, boy? Because I don't do social media.
anymore. Let's just say anymore.
Yeah. Anymore. Yeah, I'm done with that. So I'll give you some ways to contact me later on. I have to figure out creatively how to do it.
Yeah,
so.
we'll leave it at that for now. And I'm very close to you, to kind of just getting of it all together. You did the right thing. Thank you so much, Kwame Pianke, because take care, and we'll keep in touch with you, I suppose, on the back of the elections and the results. We'll link back with you to have your analysis of what went and what's about to come.
Okay, no problem.
All right.
Kwame
Pianke there, geopolitical analyst.
For one being representing a man for Uptown TV. You understand?